Hey, welcome to another episode of the Jonathan Project podcast, where iron is sharpening iron. And we take the biblical example of Jonathan and David and their friendship and loyalty as the inspiration for this podcast. If you want Jason and me to come on out to a men's event that you're having, come to a local business, school, wherever it may be, and you found joy, inspiration in our podcast, please send us an email at thejonathanprojectpodcast@gmail.com. Again, thejonathanprojectpodcast@gmail.com. Jason, welcome to another episode of the Jonathan Project. How are you doing today? How was your Christmas?
Hey, brother. It was good. As you can probably see, and I'm trying to be very mindful, this microphone, I think, picks up everything.
Oh, yeah.
So, I was sliding something and I saw it register. So, I'm sorry if it,
That's
listen to it, if it does.
We can take out the background noise because I have two little elephants above me that they're going out and determined to break something this morning. So,
the holidays.
yes.
It's good. It's good. Let me have a sip of my coffee. I don't know if you can.
Look at that. I like it. Where'd you get that?
Well, how about that? I had that coffee cup made.
Yeah.
And so you have one en route. I just couldn't get it there in time.
Oh, man. Well, thank you.
So,
I appreciate that.
Yeah. So a local lady was able to put the symbol on the coffee cup.
Yeah.
And so I've been holding it here waiting on the show to start so that I could drink my coffee in front of you.
That's great. You snuck that one in. I didn't see that one. One.
Christmas. Yeah. So, man, it's good to see you.
Yes, sir. Good to see you.
You know, the holidays, quite exhausting and refreshing at the same time.
That's a good way to say it. That is a good way to say it. The holidays can be a challenge. It can be hard for some folks, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And it's also one of those times where you get to reflect and just enjoy friends and family and have a good time, hopefully.
Yeah. Well, I got to thinking about it. And of course, it's this time of reflection. And of course, last year during Christmas, I was in Africa.
Yeah.
And I was in Chad at that time. And not a lot of Christmas spirit except what you bring to the table, right?
Sure.
Of course we did, but it was always good. It's good to be home this year and good to see the family. A lot of people who listening have been deployed multiple times and multiple times on Christmas, right? So it just kind of made me stop and I was kind of reflecting on it. I have people that go, "Oh, well, happy holidays." It's Merry Christmas. It is here, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was just kind of thinking about that. As a matter of fact, we got fueled the other night, my son and I, and we kind of ending some of the holiday festivities. I'm like, "Hey, I need to go get fuel." And at the counter, the lady's like, "Oh, happy holidays." I'm like, "Well, Merry Christmas." And she chimed right back, "Merry Christmas." It's almost like people are afraid to say it these days, which kind of bothers me.
Yeah. No, I've seen that a lot, especially since over the last year, which this has been, a long, long year for me in a lot of ways as I transitioned out of the Army after 22 years and then moving into a corporate space where everything is, by the numbers, very political and, happy holidays. We had a holiday party. It wasn't a Christmas party as I've heard so many other times. And I understand where people don't want to offend someone, like, if they're Jewish and they have Hanukkah or whatever else is going on. I get it, but it doesn't bother me if someone says, happy Hanukkah or whatever else is, I'm going to say, Merry Christmas or, happy holiday to you or whatever is going on. I just think nowadays is what it feels like about things. And to be quite honest, December 25th, the shopping season, especially here in the US, let's just be honest, it's centered around, Christmas. So,
so I did some research. You'll appreciate it. So the 25th was started by Sextus Julius Africanus.
No, that's a mouthful.
It is a mouthful. Probably was in the 6th grade before he learned to write his name.
Probably.
But it was in 221 AD, and they just accepted it, right?
Uh,
But but what's even more significant to me is that this is when Christ's birth is the day that splits time, right?
yeah. Hmm.
It's either before Christ, BC, or AD in the year of our Lord.
In the year,
And literally that moment splits time.
yeah,
No other event has done that. You know, I think those are some reflections that we have waxed over with the commercialism. And don't get me wrong, there are a lot of very good people who keep Christ at the center of it. Yeah, it's just a bombardment of, you know, the next greatest thing. It almost makes the Grinch cartoon prophetic, right? Like all the
yeah.
things you need that you're going to throw away in 5 minutes.
No,
So,
that's a great point. Like, Jesus' birth is one of those red letter days, those are super important days in human history. No matter whether you choose to believe or not about the Christmas narrative, excuse me, Jesus is that definitive thing where time is oriented off of him, and
mhm.
this holiday in particular, this time of the year, really boils down to his birth and how important that was for all of humanity. And it's good to take some time and reflect on that.
No, I think that's it. There's always the, contention about nativity scenes. Those are always in the news. Well, should we
Yeah,
have one here? Should we have one there? And I agree with you. The 25th is Jesus's birthday, right?
yeah,
That's the one we celebrate that. If any other religion wants a birthday, that's on them, right?
yeah, yeah,
If Buddhism wants a birthday, hey man, go have your own birthday.
yeah,
The 25th is devoted to Christ. And as a matter of fact, it was like a mass of Christ on this day. Is what the original thing was, right? And I know a lot of Protestant churches, a lot of churches have those candlelight vigils around there. I
yeah,
think that's really good.
yeah,
We attended ours,
yeah, yeah.
all those candles in one room. I thought, man, this is it. This is the moment, because it had all the kids in there, and you give them all candles, and I'm like,
It's just funny.
man,
I love it. That is a humorous thing because I think that every year we do a Christmas. We go to our Christmas Eve service at our local church, and it's always a candlelight service.
mm,
Everyone's. They do a great job of getting you to reflect and think about what that night really meant, or that time.
yeah.
But I'm like you. I find it humorous because I know I have two children that are under the age of 12, and I look at them as the wonder, especially in the boy's eyes, as he is getting to hold fire. and,
Oh man, yeah. It's like I can contain this.
and then they do this. They did a bold move this year. They're like, hold it above your heads, and I'm like,
Mm,
my son is gonna light his
some
hair on any second now. So
nice old lady who had a lot of hairspray
out of hairspray
did it
about to go up, but
about to go up. Yeah.
it's funny. It's a good time.
It was good. It was good. How was your travels? I gotta ask.
It's always Jason. It's me and you talked about this in a lot of different ways. It's good to go home, but it's always it takes you back to how you started, and that doesn't necessarily mean that's where you're still at, right? And I think for anybody out there, going home, being around your family, friends, old places, right? It can be an emotional kind of roller coaster. But it was
Mhm.
good. It was good to spend a little time with the family, break some bread, and share some laughs and some memories. And then we're back here in the wonderful Sunshine State. So
Yeah, I think that's good, man. You highlighted something. So we went back to see my parents, and
yeah,
of course, before we go, we stop at a local grocery store, right?
yeah,
Franchise. And I couldn't help but comment, there used to be a church right here in this parking lot. And I was pretty upset about it. I was kind of like, because I hate to see when churches go away. And
yeah.
I'm like, man, this was a big church. What happened to it? And I was kind of beat up about it. Well, sure enough, we drive down the road and a little bit further down the road, and the church has moved. So
Oh,
they obviously did well enough to sell it to Publix. Whoops. And then, you know, relocate. So that was really good.
oh
But
yeah,
you're right. You go home, you do see a lot of memories.
yeah. A lot of change, a lot of memories, but it was good. Like I said, the
Yeah.
Christmas season, it was good. But like I said, at the same time, I'm kind of worn out.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, right? As we're going to talk about here in a moment. I think for guys, the holidays can take on a little different kind of twist and meaning, and can feel like you're just facilitating the activities versus actually participating and being a key player. And I think the Bible had a guy like that too, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so we had talked about Joseph last Sunday, and you and I talked a little bit about him, and so I had some notes, and then of course I did some reading last night. Joseph, to be such a central person in the nativity scene, like his character is always in there, right? Like it comes in a set,
Yeah,
and he is mentioned, right?
yeah,
Like if you don't get Joseph in your nativity scene, you can take it back.
yeah, yeah,
They'll be like, we got it.
yeah,
Give you another one. But he's only mentioned so many times
yeah,
in the Bible,
yeah,
and I looked at it. He's highlighted. He's a carpenter.
yeah,
Matthew talks about it, right? And he's engaged to Mary when Mary becomes pregnant. And I thought about that. Like, here's a guy, he's engaged. He's been engaged for a while. He's a carpenter. He's making money. He's excited about to get his life going. Like both you and I are married. I remember those times when, man, I'm excited. I'm going to get my life going. I'm marrying this beautiful young lady. And here we are, right?
yeah.
And then he figures out she's pregnant.
Oh yeah.
So, and then, I thought about it like this. Joseph character is revealed under pressure.
Yes.
Really is. Like people are like sponges. When the pressure hits, whatever's in it comes out. Right?
I love it.
If it's dirty dishwater, it's dirty dishwater.
Yep.
If it's whatever, right?
Yeah.
But when the pressure hit, the Bible records him as just, right? It gives a couple of characteristics. I had 3 is what I found. He had mercy and compassion, right? And I think as a father, I think that's super important as a spouse, as a husband, mercy and compassion, because he wasn't willing to make her a public example.
Yeah.
Like he had every right to, according to their law, right?
Yeah.
Like he could have thrown a fit and said, hey, this isn't for me, but he didn't. And as a matter of fact, the third characteristic I found was he was obedient. Can you imagine that? Like, hey, you're getting married, she's pregnant.
Yeah.
And it ain't your baby. And I think there was a popular TV show about things like that. Maybe Maury or Jerry Springer made a lot of money off of that. But so he does, but an angel shows up and he's obedient. He has a dream, and the angel basically says, you know what? This is what's happening. She's bearing Jesus. You're going to name him Jesus, and he'll take away the sins of the world. And he says, you need to marry her. So he does it. Like, that had to be a pretty powerful dream and pretty significant.
Yeah. I mean, when you look at Joseph's in a dilemma, to say the least. And I think for every guy out there, Joseph is relatable in more ways than we probably even think about during this time of year. The stories listed out in Matthew, 1:18 through 25 is where we get the story. And like you said, Joseph feels like he is like this undercard to the big fight. He comes out, he does some things, and he kind of fades away, and we don't know much about him, but you can relate to him in that situation being, hey, I've met this beautiful young lady, like you said, I'm excited. And in that culture, being betrothed, engaged, was pretty much you're married. Like it's lock, stock, and barrel. There's no, well, we're kind of figuring it out. We're going to premarital counseling, we're going to see how this works. No.
They weren't off-ramping that.
No, there's no off-ramping, right? But the story, and this is why I love the Bible and what it points out to us with Joseph's story, is for real people. And for all those who may struggle and don't believe, what you find in the Bible is very true and broken stories. Can you imagine you have your life, you think you have a plan, you're going to get married, build this beautiful life with this young lady, and then she's, oh, by the way, I'm pregnant, and it's the son of God. And what he had to go through emotionally is one of the things I thought about. He had the disappointment, confusion, anger probably even popped up. You know, that sense of betrayal. Like, you're really gonna throw out the God card? You're gonna say God did this? Like, you think I'm that dumb? You know? And you know, really what I take from that situation, that initial moment, is I love where you're in the story. We see Joseph kind of steps away. He's like, I'm gonna put you away quietly. He's pausing and he's thinking. And that's
Yeah.
really something for us as men, women listening to this episode here, is to think about in those heated charged moments. You need to take a second to kind of pause and to think. And that's where we see the angel come back and say, hey, you know, don't do this. She was telling you the truth.
Yes. Well, tactical pause is a big deal, right?
Yeah.
Like, you take a tactical pause and figure it out. I love where the Bible says he was just, and it uses, and it gives those three components of it, mercy, compassion, but then he has obedience, right?
Mhm.
And first off, if you look at the book of Matthew, it gives the genealogy of Christ. And let's see, I think it's the one through David, isn't that it begins with David, but it's the one of talking about Joseph. When you see Joseph's genealogy,
Mhm.
and the angel comes in, he goes, hey, you're going to name him Jesus, and you're going to call his name Emmanuel. There's nobody by that name in his lineage, right? The angel's very clear. This is not your son, but you are going to take care of this child.
Yeah.
And he tells him this, and then so he's born, right? So Jesus is born. There's Joseph. He's taking care of him the best he can. If he's born in a manger, okay, you can kind of infer he wasn't very wealthy. The Bible also talks about that, right?
Yeah.
So here's Joseph taking care of someone that he knows is not his child.
Yeah.
Even when the angel talks to him, the key words is carry the child and his mother. All right, you're going to flee to Egypt. Get the child and his mother.
Mhm.
It doesn't say get your family. It says get the child and his mother. And then when he's in Egypt, the angel comes to him again and goes, take the child and his mother. Doesn't say your family.
No, you're right.
And when you think about it, so those three components, mercy, compassion, but obedience is kind of key. Like, that's what that, to me, when I see the term just, that's what it meant. And Joseph had to step out on faith. And when, we always talk about how Satan can ruin things. And if you guys are there's always a show before the show. And that's where Satan tries to off ramp this show with technical difficulties, whatever, could be happening. But look at all the golden opportunities that Satan had to off ramp this event.
Yeah.
All that Joseph had to do is go, no, this is a dream. I don't believe it, right?
Yeah.
Or miss going to Egypt, or miss coming out of Egypt, or all those things. But God called Joseph to bat, right? Like, he put him in there for a reason.
Yeah.
And then that's about all that's said about Jesus, or about Joseph, not about Jesus. But he goes,
a lot about
Bible
Jesus.
you're reading, Jesus continues.
Yeah.
But he goes, that's all it said. And you kind of infer that Joseph passed away before the crucifixion. Because, he looks down at Mary and says, behold, I'm going to pass you over, John, take care of her. I forget the exact phrase.
Yeah.
But yeah, Joseph, a lot to be said in those very few verses.
No, you're right. And I think one of the things, one of those takeaways, you kind of hit on it to emphasize it, though, is sometimes our greatest strength is the ability to stop, pray, and reflect before making a decision.
Mm-hmm.
And Joseph strikes me as a man that was, quick to listen. He was, had a slow burning fuse, had a lot of patience.
Yeah.
And there's no doubt in my mind that's one of the characteristics and why the Lord, gave him this great responsibility, because Joseph didn't have a problem. He saw it as God's plan. And we have to realize that sometimes we're going to face those situations where our plans are disrupted. Things have gone sideways. You feel lost. You feel confused, angry. But if we could take a lesson from Joseph's life, is maybe it's not a problem. It's just a part of your journey and part of God's plan to get you where you got to go. And
Yeah.
one of the first things we see, one of the most beautiful things we see in Joseph's story, or his predicament, if you would, is God entrusted him to be a protector,
Mm-hmm.
and Joseph took on that responsibility. He could have, from a cultural perspective, just blown up the spot, so to speak. He could have put Mary out, he could have put her to death.
Yeah.
He could have made her an outcast, but he chose to protect from the get go. I want to protect your honor. I really care about you. It's clear that he loved her, right? And he took Jesus, and raised him as his own for all intents and purposes we know. And we see that time and time again, taking the child to Egypt, taking the child back to Israel. And I'm sure, and we'll probably get this on the other side, there were probably many times that Satan tried to do something against that household when Jesus was quote unquote young and vulnerable. He's out playing, and there's snakes or whatever, and Joseph had to stand up and do the right thing. He obviously taught Jesus a little bit about a trade. He embodied a work ethic into Jesus, like, hey, I'm a man that knows how to make, I'm a carpenter. And we get that he was the son of a carpenter, right? Is
Mm-hmm.
what we learned. So trusting in God's plan and taking that time to think and to see problems not necessarily as the end all be all, but maybe this is just a little bit of a rougher step towards the journey and the path that I'm asked to be on.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, the last time Joseph is mentioned is when they did the big trip and he comes back and they've been walking with family and Jesus isn't found. Right.
Yeah.
And they find him at the temple and he goes, well, I'm to be about my father's business.
Yeah.
Right. And, you think about it, Joseph in his entire life, he was full. Well, let's be candid. When people looked over and they said, is that really your child or not? Right. Because virgin birth, let's be candid. That's one of one.
Yeah.
Okay. Like,
Yeah.
An anomaly is that's putting it very mildly.
Sure.
Like you have the one of one. And Joseph, his whole life is by public eye because Jesus hadn't declared his ministry. He's raising, does the community say that he's raising his child, or is he saying that he's raising somebody else's child?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, we
The
don't
Bible
know.
doesn't tell us. But Joseph was a caretaker. He stepped up to bat and he did what was right. We don't always get to pick our battles, but we get to pick how we negotiate them.
Sure.
And by the way, the dreams only appeared to Joseph. They didn't appear to everybody else.
No, you're right, Jason. And I think that those lessons of facing those life challenges is something that we can draw from those short few verses that we have of Joseph's life and those snapshots, that even when life feels a little chaotic, God hasn't left the building, right? He's working behind the scenes constantly. And Joseph clearly demonstrates that sovereignty, that God is in control. As hard as that was for that man, I'm sure at times, like we said, like, hey, your buddies are like, is that really your kid, Joseph? What's, Jesus is a little bit different. Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
You guys are at the temple and he's talking about he's about his father's business. Well, you're a carpenter and constantly being facing those challenges. But Joseph teaches us it's how you respond. Your response really matters to God, and our faith and our obedience is something that we clearly get from Joseph and his life. And that's important. How you respond really matters.
I think it's very important, right? And plus, Jesus wasn't named after anybody in his family.
Yeah.
And that's a big custom.
Yeah.
That whole lineage piece. And it was a big deal. As a matter of fact, when you look at the rest of Jesus's half brothers, I think one of the brothers is named Joseph. I can't really remember off the top of my head.
Yeah.
But Joseph took it on. And I think during the holiday season, I know for me and for you and other guys, I do think a little bit about Joseph. I'm like, what would it have been like to be the caretaker of of Christ.
Yeah.
Yep, I'm here. What do you think he was thinking? Like, yeah, what am I going to contribute to his upbringing? You know, it's definitely not like raising my children where you're like, hey, you need to steer this back on tracks.
Yeah.
I don't think those conversations came up, you know?
No. You know, I don't ever think, and I know 100% with a doubt, Jesus was never disrespectful to his
No.
mother, or because he says he lived a sinless life.
That's right.
But I do think the very humanness of it is, I think those challenges that we face in Joseph's life and raising the son of God is a
Yeah.
clear example where your challenges can be a platform for God's glory. Because you
Hmm.
think about that testimony, we're still talking about it thousands of years later. Here's a man that stepped in and filled the gap.
Yeah.
And, sure, there were times where he might have had to go out to the woodshed and spend a little extra time, chipping away and just thinking about some stuff.
Sure.
But, seeking guidance through prayer, really practical thing that can help us with our responses, being patient. I just, to me, Joseph comes across as he was a super patient guy. And that last story we get of him where, you know, it was such a comfort, obviously, with Jesus that they're like, hey, he's been gone for a couple days, but this is kind of normal and we feel kind of good about it.
Yeah.
But that takes a lot of patience because I can't imagine with either of my children, like they're out
No.
running around with the family somewhere.
No.
But
No.
Joseph gives us that. And I think it's something that's really a strong, great attribute to foster is just slowing down, being patient, trusting in God's plan, and maybe sometimes just saying, hey, I don't know what to do but to trust and to just kind of keep moving and doing what the last thing you told me. I'm going to protect this kid the best I can, and
Yeah. I'm going to keep moving.
I'm going to keep moving.
When I think about Joseph, and you talked about, kind of going forward as we go forward, when people get this or when they begin to listen to this next week, we'll be going into the New Year's time, and it's a lot of, reflections. And, you made the statement before the show began of being grateful for what you have, right? Being grateful in the moment.
Mhm.
And I thought that was really good because Joseph, he had plenty of opportunity to go, this didn't work out the way I had thought about it. But he was, by all accounts, right here, he did exactly what he was supposed to do. He's a just man, and look at the great gift that came to us as a result of his role. He had a critical role, right? I'm not written about in the Bible. I can tell you that. Anybody thinks that we'll just kind of blow that off, show me your name in the Bible, and we'll revisit that conversation.
No, you're right. You're right, Jason. And I think, for the audience, we're all facing something right now in our lives. But taking from Joseph's life, we should ask the question, could this be something for a greater purpose?
Mm-hmm.
And especially going into the new year, a lot of the problems from 2024, I hate to be the first one to tell you if you didn't know, they're going to roll into 2025 and then there's going to be some new stuff.
Yeah.
But what we can really clearly understand is life is going to be complicated at times, but God is working all the time. And when you trust him and have that faith and obedience that like Joseph demonstrates for us in his story, even if you feel like you have a minor part, whether you're a father or business person or single mom out there, whatever the case may be, you don't know what great of an impact you are really having. And Joseph didn't get to see the end of the story. That's another thing to really think about.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't get to see this beautiful baby, this child that he had raised, he loved, fed, put a roof over his head,
Yeah.
come into his full destiny. He didn't get to see the ministry start.
Mm-mm.
But that doesn't mean that he didn't have a tremendous impact. And I think that for us, sometimes we get so focused on wanting to see the end that we miss and can't be grateful in the moments that we have on that journey and how God is really building us and making us a part of something really special.
When you look at the impact that Joseph had, when you think about this, I was thinking about his other children, right? And James, one of the apostles that came to accept Jesus as Savior and then went on and proclaimed the gospel until a very violent death.
Mm.
And that had to be Joseph's influence had to be echoed in James. Like that was Joseph's full child, and he was the first, I guess, firstborn
Sure.
of Joseph, right?
Yeah.
You know, and think about that. Like that had to have some reflection back to the influence that he had about it.
Sure.
Yeah, I agree with you. You don't, there's going to be problems in 2025. If I like the old saying, if you are having problems, hang on, they're going to get better. But if you're having a good time, get prepared. Bad times are coming, right?
Yeah.
It's one or the other.
Yeah.
And so, but I think having that tactical pause of prayer and tactical pause and being obedient, showing a lot of mercy and compassion, those are big deals.
Yeah.
As we go forward.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I also like what you had to say, I mean, as a dad, as a husband, a single mom, or anybody out there, if you have any influence over people, being grateful for what you have instead of complaining about what you don't have is key.
Yeah.
There's plenty we don't have.
Oh yeah.
But also you've got a lot more than you think. Yeah, just getting to be around family is a big deal. I think there are plenty of people who didn't get to see their loved ones this year.
Yeah.
There are people, there's always somebody worse off, right?
Yeah. And it can be hard to see, but I think, what I would challenge the audience to think about as we put a bow on yet another great episode here is, reflect on your own challenges, and the holidays and the great gifts that you were given that you might not even believe were under the tree or someone gave to you, but you got a lot if you really sit back and think about it and see how God is using those things. Even that time that you thought was challenging, like, oh, I had to go and, visit this or do that or during the holiday season, it's still a time to really be grateful and to think how God is using that for his purposes for your life. And then to take on just that mindset of Joseph that we talked about in the episode, to trust and obey. When you see a problem, it might just be the next step in the plan for you. So,
yeah.
Well, my dear brother here, that's another episode of the Jonathan Project podcast. This episode will be out on Tuesday morning, along with every episode, as we always put out. You can find us on Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, YouTube, Apple, you name it, Spotify, we're there. And again, if you want us to come out, speak to engagement you have in the new year, we would love to do that. So please reach out to us at the Jonathan Project Podcast at gmail.com and the Jonathan Project Podcast at gmail.com. Well, that's it, brother.
Oh, you forgot to mention we have a TikTok or something?
That's right. We are on TikTok. Again, trying to keep moving and doing these great things. But thank you, Jason, for reminding me and the audience. Yes, we're on TikTok. If you see the preview links, and we'll try to put this out, we have a website which makes it easy to find all the places you can subscribe with one little sweet shot. But we'll put that into the comments as well. But again, on behalf of Jason and myself, we wish you a very happy new year as we go into 2025. Make sure that you take the Lord with you and continue to be that light that he's called us to be as we enter a new year. All right, brother.
All right. We'll see you.
All right. Bye.